Hello everyone, and welcome to this tutorial on Android Studio, where we will be building a recycler view. So the first thing we need to do is in our main activity, we can put our recycler view onto the screen, or we can go straight into the code. What I'm actually going to do, the first thing I'm actually going to do is I'm going to go to my activity main, and inside my activity main, I am going to go into my code section, and I am going to change from a constraint layout to a linear layout. You can use constraint layout if you want. Whatever layout you want to use, you are perfectly welcome to do that. But I'm going to use a linear layout, and I am going to get rid of my text view. And then in my design side, I'm going to drag in a recycler view into there. Okay, so I'm going to give my recycler view an ID. I'm going to call it RV list. RV stands for recycler view for me. So this is the first thing that we've done, which is that we have actually created our recycler view. We've actually put our recycler view onto the screen. But another thing to notice is that the reason why recycler view is more preferred than a list view is because the recycler view recycles the view. So let's imagine that you have 1,000 things on your screen, 1,000 views, 1,000 lists, or a list with 1,000 views on there. If you use a list view, it will create a new view each time, a new view each time, a new view each time. But with a recycler view, what happens is that when a view goes off the screen, it uses that view. The view goes from the screen, goes at the bottom, then it puts the data inside of it. So it recycles the same view rather than having 1,000 views. You probably have, let's say, 10 views on the screen, and then it keeps you, when one goes off, and then you can only see 9, it uses that view and it brings it all the way to the bottom and then imports new data inside of there. So it recycles the views rather than, creating new views, and that's what makes it better. But of course, that's how a recycler view works. Some people still prefer to use a list view. So in order for us to use a recycler view, for the purpose of what we're going to create, let's say we're going to create a project, we need to create something called an adapter and a custom adapter in that case. So the custom adapter is what's going to help us to be able to, work with our recycler view. Now, if you're looking for a custom adapter or how to build a custom adapter to work alongside a recycler view, you can go on the Android developer webpage, website, and then you'll be able to look at the example that's there. So that's the example that I'll be using currently for this project. So the next thing I need to do is I need to create a layout. Now, you'll be asking yourself, why do you need to create a layout if one already exists? Well, in a list, right, we have a lot of views in there, or a lot of items, should we say, and each item has a layout. So let's say, for example, I have a list. Let's say you're scrolling through a list. You realize that in that list, all of them look the same. That's because there is a layout that every single one of those items in that list is going to have to use. So what I'm going to do is I am going to create a new layout, and that's going to be what each item in our list will look like. So I click on my layout and I go to new, then I click on layout resource file. Now in my layout resource file, I'm just going to call my list, let's say simple layout item. Let's just put example next to it so that you know exactly what it is. And we can change what it's supposed to be. We can either change that from a constraint layout to a linear layout when we're creating it, or we can leave it that way. I'll just change it later on just so you can see how it can be changed. So I'm just creating a new layout file, and I'm just going to click on OK. When my layout file is created, you would see that it will give me an XML file similar to our activity main. And in there, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to change my constraint layout again into a linear layout. And then what I want to do is for my list, let's say I have 10 things in the list. For each item on my list, I want it to have a name and then maybe a button. We're not going to call the button today, but just want to show you an example of it. So I'm just going to go to my design section, and then I am going to drag a button onto the screen. Well, first of all, I'm going to drag a text view onto the screen. So I have a text view onto the screen. in my linear layout, let me just put an orientation of vertical there. So I've put a text view onto the screen, and then let me just show you. So let's pretend that we have our views orientation is vertical. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put a text view onto the screen again, just so that you'll be able to understand. Text view onto the screen. And then I'm going to put a button also onto the screen. So I've got a button onto the screen. And then let's imagine that if we have 10 of these, what's going to happen in a list? What would happen is each item in that list would have a text view and it will have a button. So we're basically coding how each item should look like, right? And this design is going to affect every single one of the item in the list. So in my code, I'm going to call this one txt, and let's say username, for example. And then for my button, I'm going to say btn. I'm going to say edit, for example. It doesn't like the fact that I'm using edit. So let's say edit user. And then we're going to have a button called edit user, which was what we'll say on the button. So when we go to our design, I'm just going to zoom in for you to see how it will look like. So each item on our list will look like this, right? Let me just put whatever here so that you'll be able to see the design. So each item on our list will look like this, right? So you can imagine having 10 of these. So we're just coding the layout of what our items should look like. Now we are going to go to our main activity, and we're not going to code in our main activity yet. We're actually going to create an adapter. Now, adapter is what binds, let's say, for example, we have a data and then we have a list with 10 items on the screen. We need to bind them together. So the adapter helps us to match up together. So in our RecyclerView, we have RecyclerView typically has ideally what a RecyclerView will end up having is you would end up having you have an onCreate Viewholder. This method is created anytime that you create a new Viewholder. So that's the part where we actually create our view, or we actually put our view, we inflate our view. Then we have our Unbind Viewholder. So this method, we use this method to combine our data to our item on the screen. And then we have an get item count, which is where we actually count the number of items we have in our RecyclerView. So once we start to code all of these things, you will start to make sense. But the first thing that we need to do is we will need to actually, right? First thing we need to do is we need to create a RecyclerView adapter. So I'm just going to click on my Java class, and let's say I'm going to call this custom adapter. And then I'm going to click OK. Now, when we create our class now, what we have here, just we're creating a normal class. But in order for our RecyclerView to work in the way it's supposed to work, what we need to do is, if you go on the Android website, you would see, for example, you will see that Android Studio would help you. So if you were to type in RecyclerView adapter, you will find a page which will look something like this, right? If you type in RecyclerView, it will bring you up to this page. Now, on this page, we're going to be using the code from this page. So I'll just explain to you quickly. So the first thing we have is, don't worry about this local data set. We'll talk about it as we go along. You will see that we have this method, public static class Viewholder, extends Viewholder. So this is where we actually provide a reference to the type of views that we're using. So for example, in our list view item, we have some items in there in our simple layout, the layout that we just created. You realize that inside of that, we have a text view and then we have a button. So this Viewholder allows us to have access to those views inside that view, inside that simple layout. Then we have our onCreate Viewholder, which allows us to connect to that layout in order to get the items that we need. So this here works alongside this class that we're going to create later on. And then we have our Unbind Viewholder. If you're a bit confused right now, don't worry. Once we start to build it up together, everything will start to make sense. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take it off the screen, right? I'm going to take it off the screen, and then I'm going to show you how everything comes together. So don't worry so much. After this tutorial, I'm sure that you will be able to understand exactly what we're trying to build. So The first thing we're going to do is, if you look at our class, we need to extend a recycler view in order to get access to the recycler view method. So I'm going to do extends recycler view dot adapter, and that's the adapter that we're using. And inside the adapter, we're going to pass in a custom adapter, the same name as our class here, dot, and then we're going to use a view holder. Okay, so that view holder is what we're going to build later on. So we're going to use a view holder. So you see us with custom adapter dot view holder. Right now, once we create this custom view adapter, it will start to give us errors. It will tell us that you need to implement some methods in there, etc. So let's click on this implement methods. When we click on this implement methods, what would happen is, because we are extending the recycler view holder, there's some methods that we need to implement in there. These were the methods that I spoke to you earlier on about. So I'm going to click OK. When I click OK, it would give me these methods. Now, it's still showing us an error because at the point we haven't actually created this view holder class. So if we click on it, we can actually create a view holder class, but I'm going to create it manually myself so that I'll be able to show you exactly what we're going to do with this view holder class. So to create this view holder class, I'm just going to start off. I'm going to create at the top of here. So public class, public static class, view holder, because it's looking for this view holder class that we said we're creating. And then this view holder class, we are going to extend, right, the recycler view holder dot view holder. Right now, what we've just basically done is we're saying that, oh, we're going to create a class called view holder, and it's going to be inside our custom adapter. So we are basically connecting to this view holder class inside our custom adapter. It's a class in a class in a way. So what we have here is public static class view holder. And then it's going to tell us that because you are extending this recycler view holder, you need to actually implement some methods. So it's going to tell us to implement a constructor called view holder. And that's what we've done. We've just implemented a constructor called view holder. And then with a super class in there, right? Now, at this stage, we're actually nearly there. Inside our view holder, we are going to now get access to the elements from that list view. So before we continue with this, the first thing we want to do is we want to leave this for now. And I want to go inside our onCreate view holder. The reason why I want to go to our onCreate view holder is because at the moment, we haven't actually connected to that simple layout yet. So anytime we try to find an item now from that layout, it will give us an error because we haven't yet connected to it. So in order to do that, the first thing we need to do is we need to now inflate it, which is now we need to now connect to that simple layout. And what that onCreate view holder would do is that it would create for us, it would create for us a view, an item. It will create a view, each layout. So each layout will be created several layouts, several lists. In that list, you'll see several views being created from that layout, right? That's how we're able to come up with a list, because that inflator creates a view for that layout. So it creates several views from that layout. So what we're going to do is in our custom onCreate view holder, what we are going to do is we are going to write this code, okay? We're going to do view, right? View equals layout inflator. So this layout inflator is going to create us several views, so it's going to create us a view from that simple layout that we had before. And we're going to pass in this view group, and we're going to call ours, well, ours is actually not called view group, because ours here is called parent. On the Android, you will see view group, but we're going to use parent dot, and then we're going to say get the context, right? Get the context dot inflate, right? And the first we need to pass in is r dot layout dot. Remember, we're trying to use the simple layout item, right? And then the next one we're going to pass in is we're going to pass in our parent, and then we're gonna do the last one as a false. Okay, so at this stage, what we've basically done is we've just now connected to our simple layout item. We're gonna inflate it. So each layout is going to create a view on its own. So it's gonna create, with one layout, we're gonna create several views depending on the number of items we pass in or the number of items we're going to have. Then we are going to return, right, a new view holder, and then I'm going to pass in our view, right? And then we are done with the onCreate view holder. All we're doing is we're connecting to our simple layout. So if you're ever confused or anything, just think of it as, oh, okay, I'm going to create several views onto my screen in my list, in my list. But what layout am I going to use? I'm going to use this simple layout item example that we created before. Then I'm passing in this view group parent there. Because remember that a RecyclerView is a view group. Okay. Then next thing we're going to do is with our custom adapter now, we're done with our view holder. Then we are going to go back to our view holder now. The reason I'm going in this stage so that you'll be able to understand the code. In our view holder, we now have the opportunity to now actually find those items or those views that are inside our simple layout, right? So the first one we're going to do is we are going to we now can connect to it. So what we're going to do is we're going to create several methods. So you can think of this view holder class that we have here right now as, well, we can say that it's similar to how in our main activity, we're always finding our views, etc., etc. So what I'm going to do is up here, right? I'm going to actually create some variables. So private final text view. Why text view? Because we're going to use a text view, right? And I'm going to call it txt, and then we're going to say, what did we call our text view actually? Was it txt username? So we can just call it txt username, which is fine, right? Then inside of here, we are going to now find our view ID, our text view ID from the simple layout, because now we've connected to it. So what we need to do in this case is txt username equals, and then we're going to pass in the text view because we're saying that we need a text view. And then we're going to use this view here, right? This in our case is called item view. So we're going to use item view dot find view by ID. So we're using that view to find all the elements inside, or all the items, all the views inside of that. And we're going to connect. We're going to say rd dot txt username. And if you wanted to create one for the button, we also can. I mean, that will be down to you. At the moment, we're only coding for the txt username. Okay. So if you wanted to do that, you can also do that. Then I'm going to create another method, which is going to return our text view and access to our text view. So I'm going to do text view get text view, or get, well, we can say get text view or get text username. I'm going to put get text view because that's how Android created it. And then I'm going to return, right? I'm going to return our txt username, for example. Now, if you had a button to return, you can do whatever you want to do. It's up to you. But this class here is where we're actually finding all our view by IDs, right? Because that's why we needed to go and do this on create view holder, so that we'll be able to pass in that view, and then we'll be able to use that to help us, right? So I hope this part makes sense. Then next thing we need to do is remember that our RecyclerView is an adapter. So we need to pass in something, or we need to pass in some data. Now, where is that data going to come from? Well, in our example, we're just going to pass in a list of names, okay? So that list of names, where is it going to come from? It's going to come from an array, a string of array, right? If you're using an array list, you can pass in an array list, whatever you're using. But for this particular example, what we're going to do is we are going to store a list of names, and then we're going to match up that list of names with it. So I'm going to create in here, I'm going to create a string variable, or string array variable. and I'm going to call it, let's say, local data set, because that's what Android created it as in the example. So this is basically what I'm going to pass in order to bind my views that I would have, or my list of views that I would have, with the data that's going to come in through. So now that I've got that, I'm going to go into my next method I'm going to be working on, which is the Unbind view holder. Now, it is at this Unbind view holder that we actually bind our data to the views, the number of views that we have, okay? So if we have 10 things in our array, it will create 10 views for us, okay? And it will bind them together. So how do we bind them together? Well, we know, right? We can get, in our Unbind view holder, we know that we can get access to our view holder by saying holder dot get text view. Remember the text view, because here, what we're actually passing in here is we're actually creating an object from this view holder that we have before, which gives us access to this simple layout, right? So what we're going to do is going to say holder dot get text view, which gives us access, right? If you come here to this view holder that we have here, right? We have this get text view, which returns this text view here, txt username. And what we're going to do is we're going to say that for each text view in an example, for each text view on the screen. So remember that we're going to have, let's say we're having 5 items in our recycler view. We're going to have 5 views, right? So we're saying that for each one of the items, we're going to bind that item, right? We're going to set the text to what? Well, to our string of array. So in our string of array, remember we have a local data set. We created a local data set, and then we're going to say the position, because remember every array has a position. So this position here, we're going to pass that position in here. So what this would do is that, let's say, for example, we have in our recycler view, we have 10 items or 10 items in our recycler view. Of course, remember it's a list. So each item in there is what gives us the list. So let's say, for example, at view 1, or let's say view 1, then we'll look in our array, our list of array strings, and then we'll look for the position of that, and then we'll match up to it. So view 1 or view 0 will match up to string array 0, and then we'll bind them together. So the data from string array 0, index position of 0, will match up to view 0, and we'll combine them together. And that is how we are able to put all of it together in that sense, right? So that is our Unbind view holder. So what this will do, basically, like I just explained, is that it will look for our string array. So the position of our string array, let's say we have Kweku as string in index 0, it will bind that to the first view that we have. Then it will go on to number 2, to number 3, to number 4, and so forth and so forth. And the last method that we have here is get item count. Now, get this item count is meant to return the length of our array. So how we need to do that is we just pass in our array. We just say local data set, then we say dot length. And this will tell us how many items we have in our string. Now, we have basically finished with our custom adapter that we're creating. We finished with creating our view holder class, and then also connecting to our simple layout, and also binding the data together, and also returning the string.